Another edition of NAMI Tennessee at Home Live. And it's super exciting this week because we have a special guest. He's so special, we can't even introduce him ahead of time. But what I can tell you ahead of time is that you would already know if you were signed up for NAMI Tennessee's email list. Just head over to NAMITN.org and sign up. It's absolutely free, and it's how you stay in the loop with everything that's going on at NAMI Tennessee, including events like this, events like our walk, events like our gala, and of course, super important legislative advocacy and the instructions of how you can get involved and influence change for people living with mental illness and their families. So all you got to do, NAMITN.org. All right, are we ready for the super secret guest? It's Jeff!
It's a surprise to me.
Jeff Fladen, the Executive Director of NAMI Tennessee. Jeff, welcome.
Well, Gabe, it's nice to see you, and I'm looking forward to meeting at Tommy's Pizza on Lane Avenue. Is that still there?
It is still there, and it's delicious. I will say about like 10 years ago, and it hurts me to say this, they switched over from Diet Coke to Diet Pepsi.
Oh,
And
no.
I'll still go because Tommy's Pizza is in fact that good, but it hurts me. It hurts me deeply, Jeff.
I never had the pizza. I went for the subs.
Oh, the pizza is top notch, but the subs are good too. There's really nothing bad at Tommy's Pizza. And Tommy's Pizza, the big one, as you alluded
Lane
to, is on
Avenue.
Lane Avenue. But there are other ones all over. There's like 5 or 6 of them. Well, maybe there's 3 or 4 now. Pandemic's been a little rough for everyone, but there's more than one. But the Lane Avenue one, flagship.
Well, I hit Gabe up for the Columbus connection because I lived for many years in Columbus and I have grandchildren there. Actually, they're in Sunbury now, but that's sort of Columbus. But Gabe has the Tennessee connection as well.
Yeah, my whole family's there. They ditched me.
Well, you kind of learned about NAMI through your parents. Were they in Tennessee then?
They were. My parents found out about NAMI. They were living in Memphis, Tennessee, about a half an hour from Memphis, Tennessee, in a little town called Drummond's, Tennessee. And when I got sick, I still lived in Columbus, and they were calling around, and somebody said you should call NAMI, and they called the local NAMI affiliate there, which is no longer there. It's become a different affiliate from the one that they found 15 or so years ago. But yeah, it connected them right up. And then when I got better, they said, the N in NAMI stands for national. There might be one in Ohio. And the rest, as they say, is history. Oh, Jeff, you lost audio, which works great for me because it means I can do all the talking. This is wonderful. I do not know what happened to Jeff's audio. He's gone. No audio for Jeff. Wah, wah, wah. But that's okay. While Jeff is working on his audio, we have some submitted questions and we will get started. The first question right out of the gate that was submitted. Thank you, everybody who submitted questions. I suppose we should point out that all you have to do if you want your questions asked is just type them right in the comments section and we will get them right up for you. But the first question to get us started, well, Jeff, first, can we hear you now?
I'm back.
Hey, Jeff is back. Jeff, I already told the audience that we are going to get started with a hard question that was submitted by the audience in one of those emails that I alluded to earlier.
Yes.
So you can already have your questions submitted. But while we're answering the questions, put them in the comments. We'll get to as many as we can. Ask us anything. Ask us the hard stuff. But the first question that was submitted by a NAMI member was, can you treat mental illness with cannabis rather than pharmaceuticals? Jeff, do you want to go first?
I will try to go first, and it's a little bit hard for me because I can't say I'm expert on marijuana or treatment, but I try to keep up with everything that's going on, and the story is mixed. There are people who want to self-medicate, and it's legal in many places, and we have medical marijuana in many places, not in Tennessee right now, and some people seem to say it's helpful. I'm on some groups online, which you may be in, where a lot of people living with mental health conditions, they share how they're coping. And somebody was asking, what are you taking for depression? And people were doing therapy and they were taking various antidepressants. And quite a few people said marijuana. However, there seems to be emerging evidence that the amazingly strong potency that we're getting in some of their marijuana, like I'll show my age here, have become my parents. I don't really know what dabs are, but they have some things that they like concentrate it, and they're like 60 or 80% THC instead of what, 5 or 6% back in the olden times. So there seems to be some evidence that this high potency can cause problems, and whether there's such thing as a predisposition to schizophrenia or other mental illnesses due to brain chemistry um, is so new. We haven't really done enough studying to tell. So my guess is that alcohol can be helpful to some people, but it can be harmful to people, and it's got to do with the frequency and dosage, and if you've learned other coping skills and all those kind of things. So to me, a drug alone is probably not going to do it for anybody. That you need to look at how you live your life, do self-care, have social support, have some feelings of some kind of purpose or structure, things like that. So jury's mixed. What's your take?
So, first off, I want to echo everything that you just said, especially the part about marijuana is, depending on where you live, it's not necessarily controlled by the Food and Drug Administration or any sort of like overarching body, right? It's not like a Big Mac where you can travel the country and when you order a Big Mac, it's going to be the exact same Big Mac. It's certainly possible that when you purchase marijuana or any drug in, say, Columbus, Ohio, that it's going to be a different dosage, effect, strain, whatever, than if you buy it in Nashville, Tennessee, or Alaska. So the great thing about the internet is that people can talk from all over the country. The negative part about the internet is that your experience in Alaska may be very different from my experience in Columbus. And we tend to think that cannabis is exactly the same everywhere all the time. It's like that standardized Big Mac, and it's not. So it very well may work if you take the exact same dosage, strain, etc., that the person who is writing online is taking. But the chances of that happening right now in this environment are pretty much slim to none. So that's the first thing. The second thing, as you alluded, Jeff, the research is very mixed. But I'm going to go a step further and say that because of the stigma of cannabis, the stigma of a lot of different types of drugs, not only is the research mixed, it's largely non-existent. The government doesn't want to give funding for it. There's people fighting it because of just all the reasons that we can probably think of. There's somebody yelling hippie and Woodstock, and nobody is actually doing this real deep, in-depth study, unbiased, just simply looking for the answer of, is it helpful? And if it is, how? Or is it dangerous? And when is it dangerous, or how is it dangerous? And until we get the answer to those questions, we're going to get a lot of people in chat rooms saying, hey, it worked for me. And Jeff, make no mistake, it very well may work for them. But as people living with mental illness are fond of saying, we're all not alike. So just like if you've met one bipolar, you've met one person with bipolar disorder. So if you've met one person that cannabis works for, you've met one person with cannabis works for. You can't decide that because it worked for this person, it automatically works for you, because that's just nonsense.
I'm
Nonsense, Jeff.
intrigued, Gabe. I'm more intrigued about the future of medications based on psychedelic properties. However, we don't know enough about that to really know either. And keep in mind, we are not in any way endorsing illegal behavior of any kind, but there seems to be some things coming out of the scientific community that says that there may be some pieces of or some properties that may help with depression, with various conflicts and mental health well-being. But we don't encourage going out and doing that either. And you hit the nail on the head. We have to study these things because there's people trying to make money. There's a profit motive. When something is out there and they have an incentive to make money on it, it tells me even more. We need we need consumer reports of treatments to really know over time. And can scientists replicate it? That's part of the scientific method. You could replicate things, different researchers and find out. So we have a lot to learn about the brain, and this leads to my next question, unless you wanted to kind of add on the
No,
subject.
no, Jeff, I love it. What is your next question?
Okay, this is to me, these are hard questions that I ponder, and we talk about can marijuana help with mental illness? I want to know if our society causes mental illness. So we talk so much
Ooh.
about trauma now and micro trauma. Is there anybody that did not have trauma? So if you were a little child and you want to stay up because Uncle John came to visit and you have to go to bed and you're having a fit when you're 3, is that traumatic? I mean, it's not the same as a car crash, of course, God forbid. But not just that, but when you look at alcohol and drug use or abuse, how many people are really having trouble coping with life today in this country? So I wonder about our society. We can talk about consumerism, we can talk about political struggle, we can talk about media, we can talk about social media. Is our society promoting mental health conditions? So what do you think about that?
So it's such a big lift, of course, to say society causes mental illness, right? That's a I the answer to if that is the question purely in that form, no, society does not cause mental illness. Now, if the question lowers a little bit, does society exacerbate mental illness? Yeah, society absolutely does. If we lower it a little bit more, uh, does society cause mental health issues? Oh my God, yes, society absolutely causes mental health issues. And of course, then you can jump over, if society is causing mental health issues, can those mental health issues elevate into mental illnesses? Well, yes. So I suppose then we can get back to a yes to, does society cause mental illness? But here's the thing that I know for 100% sure: society defines mental health, and culture defines mental health. And it's fascinating to look at the little microcosms of culture in families. Right? Let's take the teeny tiny little families. Uh, it's amazing. It's amazing what you can see. I always say that I was raised stereotypically blue collar, and I was. My father is now a retired semi truck driver. So growing up, he was a blue collar truck driver. Worked with other blue collar folk, and my mom was a stay at home mom, and my dad believed, for better for worse, that we didn't talk about emotions, that any problem that befell a man, you just kind of rubbed mud on it, you picked yourself up, and you moved through life. That was a man's job, right? And that is how he raised me. That is what my culture and his culture taught him. And this, of course, meant I was 28 before I got any help with mental illness. Now, by contrast, I talk to other people who live with bipolar disorder, and their families maybe went to college. They're maybe therapists. They're licensed social workers. They have other friends that work in the medical field, and they were like, "Oh no, I was diagnosed with depression when I was 15. I got help immediately. I got right to a psychiatrist. I got therapy. My whole family understood it and just spotted it easily. And I grew up knowing the warning signs." So the culture of America is segmented into all of these little tiny cultures. My culture taught me, hey, don't talk about your emotions, just get your stuff done, move forward, quiet desperation. And my friends who I talked to from their culture, which was same America, same city, same town, we're the same age, they were taught, no, talk about your emotions, admit that you're struggling, and move forward. So my culture exacerbated my mental illness, and my friend's culture helped him with his mental illness. But the word cause, Jeff, here's what I want to throw back to you. Does it cause it? That's tough, because I don't think there's anything that any society could ever do that would eliminate all suffering, all stress,
Well,
all
our
issues.
suffering isn't
So
illness, Gabe. So
yeah,
let
but
me tell you a little bit more. So we used to be more outside. When you were a kid, were you of the generation where you'd still go outside and play, or were you on video games?
no. My parents wouldn't let us in the house. Like we got booted out of the house, and we had to come back in when the lights came up. When the street lights came on, that was home time. I did spend a lot of time on a computer, I'll be the first to admit, but I was required to leave my mother alone for a solid 4 or 5 hours a day.
Gee, thanks you. Uh, I I think we're separated from nature and we're separated from social support quite a bit as well. That our modern economy causes people to move where the jobs are, and businesses come and go. So we're spread out more. We're disconnected from nature, and then we have this internet with influencers giving advice and curating their lives to look really wonderful. So I do wonder, maybe a better question is, could our society promote mental health better?
Absolutely. Here, I, I have a lot to say on this subject. First and foremost, I am so burdened and sad as a mental health advocate that all we ever talk about is negative mental health. In fact, the majority of people believe that the phrase mental health only means negative. That's it. When you say, "Well, Gabe has mental health," you're like, "Ah, something bad happened to him." And the reality is mental health is the spectrum, of course, from good mental health all the way to bad mental health. And society at large almost never talks about positive mental health. They only talk about mental health in terms of when something went wrong. So, Jeff, to your point, I would love to see more robust conversations around the stop and smell the roses, which we all tend to kind of roll our eyes at a little bit. But I think you're right. I think we're so busy, we're so hectic. We're just trying to get everything done. And then as soon as we get it done, we sit around and berate ourselves for not having done more. I would like to see us take the time to smell the roses. I mean, we did not invent the phrase. The phrase was invented by our great, and a whole bunch of more greats, grandparents who thought that life was too busy at the turn of the century. So I can only imagine how busy they must think life is now. But yes, to your point, I really wish that society spent an equal amount of time discussing ways that we can, I don't even want to say improve our mental health, right? Because that makes it sound like it's bad, right? I just wish we gave equal time to positive mental health as we do to negative mental health. I think that would be extraordinarily positive for our mental health and for society as a whole.
Okay, I'm going to ask a follow up now. Is
Like follow ups.
if we focus on wellness and self care, are we minimizing the needed concern for people with serious mental illness?
So here is that's the double-edged sword of life. And there's many things. I've become a curmudgeon in my old age, Jeff. Here's the thing that I know for a fact. No matter what you say, somebody will come running at you and tell you that what you did was wrong. If you promote positive mental health, they'll say that you're ignoring negative mental health. If you educate surrounding negative mental health, somebody will come running at you saying, "Well, it's all doom and gloom to you, isn't it? You just enjoy the suffering of people." Uh, we literally in our very walls get into knock down, drag out fights about how to even discuss it. I say I have bipolar. No, you live with bipolar. Okay, well, I live with bipolar. Well, let him talk how he wants. I can't win. I Whenever I introduce myself, I offend somebody. And we have to take a step back and maybe start thinking about people's context surrounding some of these things. So when you're talking about when you're talking about positive mental health, are you leaving out negative mental health? Yes, absolutely. But that's not always a bad thing. It really becomes if mom and dad are paying attention to your sibling, does that mean that they hate you? No, it just means in that moment they're doing something for your sibling. Your turn is next. So I will say that in order to prevent sibling rivalry or at least minimize it, parents need to make sure that they're spending equal time with their children. I do think that it is a good rule of thumb, especially for mental health charities like NAMI Tennessee, for example, to make sure that we're giving equal access to many different causes and slices and silos and hitting as many as we can. But Jeff, sincerely, I do think that we need to move away from this Just because you're not talking about something doesn't mean that you're ignoring it. It just means that you're not talking about it in the moment. And it's such a distraction. It's such an incredible distraction.
I'm with you on that one because I think if you talk about heart disease, we talk about exercise and eating and avoiding fat and your weight, but we also want people to know the signs of stroke or heart attack or something like that. It's not one or the other. So
It's it. Listen, it would be. Could you imagine if McDonald's had to run an ad, and in order to not leave any of their products out, every single 60-second commercial had to include every single solitary thing they sell? Everybody listening to this is like, that's ridiculous. McDonald's is never going to run an ad with all 70 of their menu items. That's stupid. Okay, well, we can't have a conversation about every single thing that's important to mental health every single time. So I bring up McDonald's because they run an awful lot of ads for that there Big Mac. They're constantly running ads for that Big Mac, but somehow all those other products still sell. People are still aware of them. Sometimes there's decisions that have to be made, like what are people going to lean into? What are people going to listen to? How can we get people in the door? That's the wonderful thing about NAMI, right? NAMI has a ton of programs, but we have to make sure that we get the most valuable or important or the program that is going to connect with the people we're talking to front and center. If I'm talking to a group of family members, I'm going to lead with family to family. If I'm talking to a group of peers, I'm going to lead with peer to peer. If I'm talking with a group of people who want to contribute, want to give back, maybe want to speak, in our own voice is going to come out. If it's walk season, gala season, I'm going to lead with all of that. But once we get you in, once we capture your attention, then we have time now. And again, this is NAMI Tennessee's live. The website has it all. So I'm always fascinated when people are like, well, you missed this. It's on the website. We didn't skip it. It's right there. And if something's not on the website, then now we have an opportunity to add it to learn and grow, because certainly we have missed things. I kind of want to throw that back to you, Jeff, as an executive director. Has there been a time that a criticism has been valid where somebody has said, hey, you're not talking about X enough, and you've really looked at it and thought,
oh
they're
sure.
right. I've
Yeah.
missed it.
I think the websites are challenging because there's so much information there that you have to really go to look for it. And if you have suggestions about our website or any of our communications, drop us a line at info@namitn.org.
Hey,
But
I can.
I want to take a question out of the chat here, and I'm just going to make a comment, and it's about getting insurance companies to consider mental health as physical health. So what's hard about that is making people follow the law, because that's actually the law. We have parity legislation, and in Tennessee, if you feel that you are having discrimination with health insurance not being covered, we encourage you to complain at the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. There's a form to complain. We've been working for years to help with that. We have a Facebook Live coming up in May about that. And you can again email info@namitn.org for information. But what it takes is complaining when it doesn't happen. If people don't complain, then the part of the government that license insurance, they think everybody's fine. It's until we hear about problems that they get fixed. And there's been lawsuits around the country and all that. So it's parity's the law of the land, but making it harder and making it happen is harder. And I don't want to point the finger at insurance, but sometimes it seems like insurance companies are also beholden to shareholders.
Well, it's a profit center, right? It's the less they pay for, the more money they make. The more money they make, the happier they are. It's not a we're I'm not trying to I'm trying to avoid politics desperately here, but this is the setup that we have. We have decided that in addition to covering people who are sick and getting them the care they need, we also want to profit off of them. And profit is not a dirty word. I love money. I don't want anybody to hear that Gabe is anti-capitalism, but we have to wonder if that is where does that draw the line? Because as we've discussed, or where do we as a society draw the line? Because I'm sure anybody can think about giving somebody a $500,000 worth of care is costs $500,000, whereas somebody passing away is largely free. So therefore, from a purely business perspective, death is cheaper. And we have to recognize that that's obviously way too far. I'm not suggesting that insurance companies do that, but that is the most extreme version of that argument. So if they don't have to pay for mental health, are they saving money? And can we get people on our side? I like this question, and I like what you said, Jeff, because the reality is if I walk out right now and I say, "Hey, my father has cancer and the insurance company won't pay for it," everybody within the sound of my voice will immediately stick their head up and say that's BS. I will be able to get myself a, a, a a pitchfork crew like on The Simpsons, ready to march on the insurance company tomorrow. No problem. Any stranger hearing my story will immediately connect with it and want to help. But if I walk out and I say my brother has schizophrenia and he needs round the clock care and the insurance company won't pay for it, nobody even looks up.
Well, I think
It,
one thing that people ought to consider doing if they have insurance is complain to the people that are providing the insurance. If it's from your employer, go to your HR. And I know that you might not want to talk about a behavioral health condition, but go to HR and say to HR, you guys are paying for this insurance. I'm contributing to it and it ain't covering,
right.
and bring them into it. I think that that's part of it. Or if it's 10 care, you can contact the state and you can contact the insurance provider. Use those appeals, push it, don't let it wear you down, and advocate for yourself.
And try to get a group. Again, this is the power of groups like NAMI. This is the power of safety in numbers, right? The one person might not be able to do it, but like Jeff said, that's why it's super important to bring in human resources, because now you got help, right? Uh, Contact your local NAMIs, your group of people, get them to write letters, make calls on your behalf, engage your doctor. Unfortunately, it's no stone left unturned. The squeaky wheel really does get the grease. And Deborah
Well,
also
there's
wrote,
more to it because I don't want you to go past this.
okay, go
The,
ahead.
the, the corporate world is more aware that employees are impacted by mental health or substance use disorder, and they want treatment for their employees. They're paying for it. It's got to do with their profitability. And I believe employers are more receptive, particularly larger employers with HR departments, and that where's my coverage?
Yeah, absolutely. Deborah posted a follow up question. My health insurance will just give 6 sessions per incident, and then I guess we were good. Jeff, I am not a parity expert, and I know it's very difficult to be a parity expert, but you know way more. So, is that parity? If they are covering cancer and they're covering mental health, for example, I know that that's parity,
Yeah,
but there's no
answer
such
yes.
thing as six.
It's
Is
not,
it?
six isn't magic, but with physical therapy, it's well known you get a certain number of sessions, and if you're making progress, you can get more sessions. That's pretty deeply embedded. So it's not just a number automatically. There's something great about six, there's not. But the therapist has to request more sessions typically. And again, if it's not given, then yeah, I think it'd be a parity violation.
And once again, we're back to advocacy. I want to give a big shout out to all the people who have pushed this rock up the hill throughout the decades, including my family, including my friends, including me, including people who have helped me, including people who I have helped. NAMI, of course, has been instrumental in this for what, going on 5 decades now. If there is any politician listening, sincerely consider the fact that we're suffering, we're sick, right? There's a reason that we're engaging our health insurance is because we're not well. And then there's this burden where Jeff and I are just sitting here like, oh well, yeah, you got to advocate, you got to call your employer. We're not saying this as cavalierly as maybe it comes out, because we're just so used to it, and it's so sad. I think I'm going to speak for you, Jeff. I know that I want to live in a world where somebody has a mental health issue and they just get help. They don't have to engage their insurance company, or I'm sorry, their human resources. They don't have to call NAMI. They don't have to post on social media. They just say, I need help. The help is given, and then they can go on with their lives.
Well,
And
I'm going to mention we have a real problem, and we need more people to go into mental health work, because with what insurance companies will pay for private therapists, many of them are going cash only because it's not worth it to them to do the bureaucratic effort. And then there's not enough folks that will take the insurance, and most people cannot afford out of pocket private pay for psychotherapy. It's just too expensive. So we got some real problems there. And part of it is a work shortage, and part of it is that insurance companies have to pay salaries a little bit better. It's a big problem.
it is, but we're working on it. We're working on it. We're fighting for you right now on Facebook Live. Jeff, I want to ask you a hard question. So the first thing that I want to say is that you've been around longer than I have. That is the most polite way that I can say you're old. I did my best to clean it up. But sincerely, you have been working in this. You've been a mental health advocate for a long time. I mean, I was still in diapers when you started.
Oh, God.
Again, I'm desperately not trying. I swear, this is my last episode hosting probably, because yeah, I just called the executive director of NAMI Tennessee old. But sincerely, in the 30, 40 years that you've been doing this and everything that you've seen, even in your lifetime and in your professional career, what has gotten better? We talk about the things that we still want to improve, but what have you seen in the past few decades that have improved dramatically, that give you great hope that we are at least on the
A lot is
upward
better.
mobility?
Oh, there's a lot better. First of all, we have peers now, and treatment plans can talk about hope and having a life and not just staying out of the hospital. So having peers involved in the recovery system and the treatment system, and sharing stories, personal stories, that I can get better and you can get better too. We had that in addiction when I was working in the 80s when I started out, but we did not have that in mental health, and it's being recognized as really important. So I think that that's improved a lot. Some other things that have improved again is treatment plans. Uh, taking my medicine and staying out of the hospital. That used to be a big treatment plan thing. How about, what are your goals? What kind of life do you want to have? And a strengths-based approach. What resources do you have that can enable you to move toward these goals? I like that a lot. I'm a big fan of IPS. That's been around a while now. And IPS,
Wait. What's IPS?
well, I hate to mess it up. Individualized Placement Services, I
Gotcha.
believe. It's a research-based best practice for people with a mental health disability to get back to work, and it's more effective than the old way, which is just go to VR, vocational rehab, and it's more about getting you quickly to work instead of waiting until you're all better. That we believe that the working helps you to get better by itself, and we don't have to wait and send you to work adjustment and see if you can clock in and keep your workstation organized before helping you find a job. So it's mental health with voc rehab together. So we have that. I think that we have, it's more normal to get services. I think it's more acceptable. I think that that's a big plus now. That there, I think that someone wrote in the chat about stigma, not gone, but I think that it's more socially acceptable. I think now uh, people could take meds and it was just them and their private physician. Nobody would know. So people have been taking tranquilizers and antidepressants in big numbers for years and years. But the idea of I need to work on me, that's okay. Having a mental health day, uh, there was no such thing as mental health days. So we've done well in a lot of ways. And then I'm interested in emerging technology, and I hope some of the technology is good. And then, it's been a little bit of a challenge for NAMI, because 40 years ago, if you want to learn about schizophrenia, where do you go but NAMI? And the clinicians were mostly for the patient. But now, you can go online and you can learn all kind of things about every diagnosis. So we have a lot more information as well, but you have to determine if you think it's good or not. I mean, some there's all kinds of information out there and communities.
Very, very, very true. What is your thought on the rise of social media? Good or bad, or middle of the road?
Well, it's my turn for a question. I think that
Fine,
you
I'll
asked
answer
me
your
about what was
question.
better. So I want to go with stigma first.
Okay.
So there's a fellow executive director that tells me that she doesn't like stigma and we should call it discrimination because that's what we have is discrimination. What's your take on that?
So on one hand, she's right. It is discriminatory, but the semantic arguments always really they sort of wear me down, right? I think everybody knows what we're talking about when we say stigma, that I've been stigmatized, and there's a context surrounding it that I think people can relate to. And I think everybody understands. And then somebody comes along and says, hey, let's change the word. I like this word better. Okay, well, now we're spending time changing the word, discussing the change, and educating everybody on the change. That is time lost. We were all on board. We were all on board that stigma was bad and that we were stigmatizing people and that we were hurting them and that we were limiting their options and we needed to remove this stigma so that people could move forward. Okay, so now we're going to call it discrimination. Okay, now we're all on board that we're discriminating against these people and that we're limiting their options and that we need to remove the barriers so that they can all do well and move on. How long is it before somebody says, well, it's not discrimination, it's hatred. We hate them. Okay, fine. So now we're going to call it, I mean, just where is the next word? Unfortunately, because the news cycle moves so fast and because of the way that influencers work and because of social media, you need to have a hot take. You need to have something new. If you're saying the same thing as everybody else, you can't lead the pack because that makes you a follower. So somebody somewhere invents something new. And the question we have to ask ourselves is this helpful? Does it actually make things better for us? And if it does, I'm all for it. But I have to say, and this is the part that always just gets me glared at in public, all of these changes of how we describe things, say things, person first language, etc., they get a lot of buzz and discussion and everybody loves them. But the one thing they never get is studied. For a group of people that claims to love empirical evidence and studies and doing things with the scientific method, we never study if all of these new words have improved the quality of life for people living with mental illness. The other thing that we don't do is really ask people with mental illness how they feel about them. That said, yeah, it's discrimination. It's stigmatizing. It's discriminatory. It's a bad practice. It's hurtful. It's wrong. But sometimes there can be two words that just mean the exact same thing, and we don't have to exclude the other. Jeff can both be yeah. Jeff can both be handsome and dapper. The person calling Jeff dapper doesn't need to be corrected by the person calling Jeff handsome. The two words just have a lot in common. It it just becomes a preference at this point. Calling one wrong and the other right is just such a distraction.
Well, I'm going to take that to the social media now, and I'll just start with a statement and then we'll see what you've got to say. But we have more influencers and people on social media talking about their mental health and saying they have a mental health condition. So that's a change, probably for the positive. Now, just showing a curated, beautiful life, that's not a new thing. We had it in magazines, and then we had it in Facebook, and now we're getting it on TikTok. Also, there's entertainment, but everything looking beautiful, everybody happy, we're all together, and everybody's smiling. It does create a standard that's hard to meet. So I think it's mixed. But as long as people take some time to go outside too, and that's not their life, and then they have some interactions in real life with people too, uh, maybe it's not so worse than TV. And there's a few people that, rather than Hollywood making them a star, they've managed to get into the public eye. So
one of the reasons that I look like this is because I'm trying to show people that through my social media that life is not always glamorous. Gabe, why are you wearing a hoodie on the show? To show people that depression is real. See, if I wore a button-down shirt like Jeff, you would think that I had curated my social media. Jeff, I
is
agree
that
with you.
hoodie? Is that hoodie gray?
No, it's green.
Green.
Look, yeah,
Okay,
it's green.
so this you're promoting health. Green's a color for wellness.
No, it looks good against my skin. Actually, my wife bought it. I didn't even pick it. That's how bad it is for me. But one of the things that I try to do on my own social media is show the low points. I take pictures I take selfies, literal selfies at 2 a.m. when I have insomnia and can't sleep, and post them. That look, you can see my pin trying to hold back the thing. It's horrible. You saw behind the curtain. What's happening here? It's gone away from me, Jeff. I try to tell people when I suffer from depression or when I have a panic attack. I released a podcast where I had a panic attack just right during the recording, and it was all there in all its, well, very, very, very messy glory. And that's sometimes difficult. It's sometimes very, very difficult. An advocate by the name of Michelle Hammer, who lives with schizophrenia, she set up cameras in her living room to capture schizophrenia episodes. And she caught a couple and she released them. One of them got 2.5 million views, I think. And while the overwhelming, while she did get negative comments, I don't want to say that she didn't get negative comments, because she absolutely did. The majority of the comments were extraordinarily supportive. People saying, that's what my episodes look like. That's how I feel. That's what my sister looks like, or what my brother went through, or that's what my mother looked like. And it was a powerful moment, but it was a vulnerable one for Michelle that put her in harm's way based on some of the negative comments. So I think it is getting out there more, and I ultimately think it is good, but I challenge all influencers sincerely from the bottom of my heart: post the bad stuff. You will connect with people so quickly, because after a while, they just can't relate to your perfect life. And it's not advocacy anymore, it's fiction.
Mm. Trying to think where to go with that one. I think, well, I'll just share this story. I recently helped to write a op-ed related to a bill that would criminalize homelessness in Tennessee, not making it all illegal, but you couldn't sleep on public property. And it was in the Tennessean and a bunch of other papers with me and a couple other advocates wrote it. And I was curious what the comments would be, because there's some people really angry at homeless folks and blame them. And I went to look at the comments, and the comments were disabled. You had to create a profile in order to read the comments. And I'm like, I'm not going to do a profile. And I was kind of glad, because anytime I put something in the paper to advocate related to mental health, I've seen some really nasty comments. It's not fun to read them.
It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. We have to ask ourselves, as advocates, as mental health professionals, and as a society, are we willing to tolerate the abuse to get to the people who need it? And it's difficult, because I have anxiety and low moments and self-esteem issues just like everybody else. And when I get all of those horrible emails and comments, and they're difficult, and every single time the first impulse that I have is, well, I'm never doing that again. I don't need to open myself up to that abuse. But then I realize they're not my target audience. They're not the people who I'm speaking to. The people who I am speaking to often don't leave comments because they're also afraid. They don't want to tip their hand. They're worried about discrimination and stigma and all of the issues that we just discussed. And all those people leaving those mean comments, they will come after them as well. And they're not ready to deal with that. So I strongly believe that if we let this essentially hate-filled verbal minority stop us, we will not reach the majority of people who need our message, who want our message, who care about our message, that, well, because of that hate-filled minority, are not in a position to let us know that we're doing well, that we're doing good, and that we're helping. And I try to keep them in mind. I really, really do. That is what gives Gabe Howard, I can only speak for myself, the strength to move forward. I have to believe that I am reaching people who just aren't in a position to wave back.
I've got another question in mind, but do you have one you want to go first?
I mean, if you have a question, I'd be happy to answer it. But
Well, I
if
do
you
have
want me
one.
to ask you a question,
Well,
I don't mind.
I'll do one, and I throw in an opinion here and there.
All
What
right.
is going on with sports and mental health? Okay, and this goes back to, is our society promoting unhealthiness? So the pressure of being a champion on the big stage seems to be a lot, and we've had some high profile athletes that decided not to compete, and they're getting support, I think, by and large. But what's the basketball player, Ben Simmons, is that right?
I'm not 100% sure
I
of
think
the,
it's Ben Simmons.
there's been a few. There's been a few. I
Well,
mean, a
there's
few
a guy that
sports
didn't
people.
play. He didn't play, and then he got traded. He went out last year, didn't play the whole year, and he got a lot of heat from sportscasters and like, man up and play, for God's sakes. And that was sad to see. So we have sports people being more courageous now and knowing when they need to come out of the game, and I think that's a good thing. And I don't want to say the name wrong. The woman at the Olympics, the gymnast,
Simone Biles.
Simone. Yeah. So she got support. This male black basketball player's getting roasted pretty good.
She got roasted too. She got roasted really, really hard. She did get some support, but I think it was probably 70-30, 70% roasted, 30% support. It was pretty
so
brutal.
do these athletes owe us their performance?
No.
So what's going on with this?
Look, nobody owes anybody anything. There is a part of Gabe, like, I'm being as honest as I can. There is a part of Gabe, the sports fan, who, when I sit down and I watch my team, I want them to win. And I don't care what's going on in their lives. I want the person who throws the ball and the person that catches the ball to be perfect. I want the athlete that I want to watch be the incredible gymnast. I want her to be perfect. That is what I want. I want to be very, very clear on that. It was a disappointment of epic proportions not to watch Ms. Biles do her thing, because it's incredible, right? It's a thing of beauty. And was I disappointed? Yeah. I was horribly disappointed, but she doesn't owe me anything. Right? This is her life. And also, just as disappointed as I was to watch it, interviews came out and she explained that she was having such anxiety and such issues, and she was not in the right headspace, that she was literally afraid that she would hurt herself. And you've seen some of the stuff that these, especially gymnasts, do. Could you imagine if she decided to go out anyways and broke her neck on national television? What message does that send? Could you imagine watching that? That would be even more horrific than the disappointment of not watching her compete. But let's boil this down to the fact that she's a human with a job. Jeff, if I said that the board of directors of NAMI Tennessee owned you, and that you were required to do whatever, even if it was not in your own best interest for your family, your health, your career, whatever, you had to do it, everybody within the sound of my voice would reject that. They'd be like, look, he's just an employee. He can quit if he wants. Listen, being in the public eye and being paid millions of dollars, it does not change that dynamic. There's just more people and more money involved. But that said, I do think that we need to honor that it is a disappointment. It is a disappointment when your favorite player can't play. It just is. Especially if you bought a ticket to the game and you've been looking forward to it for months, and then the person that you bought the ticket to see can't play. We do need to honor that it is a disappointment, but we also need to honor that they're people just like the rest of us.
Well, so how do people find the balance between taking care of themselves and not letting people down?
So here's the fascinating thing, right? The balance is many people push themselves to the point of no return, which means they're done forever. I mean, literally forever. And we've seen this in physical, we've seen this in the physical space where somebody like they tweak their ankle. Let's just go with an ankle. They tweak their ankle and they decide to play through it. Right. So rather than missing the next game to heal that ankle or wrap it or sit it out, they play the next game with that ankle. And then they play the next game with that ankle. And by the time they tell somebody that they tweaked their ankle 3 games ago, the doctor looks at it and says, you need surgery. You have ripped that tendon. And now you're going to miss the next 6 to 8 weeks. And everybody says, if he only would have said something, if she only would have been honest, she would have missed 1 game. He would have missed 2 games. And now he's out for 6 to 8 weeks and let his team down. Look, mental health works the same way. If somebody really is empowered to miss that one practice or miss that 1 game, and of course, knows that they have that power. Can you imagine the weight that must be on you when somebody says to you, you have to do it? What if I don't want to? Tough. You have to, right? The minute you remove that weight. That's a big weight to lift off somebody. And as soon as somebody has the ability to miss 1 game instead of 6 or 8 or wait until they just crash, they're going to miss less games. And then that ripples through the locker room. Suddenly the locker room becomes more supportive so that when Jane, the basketball player, says, I can't play, the rest of the locker room says, we got you. We will make it up. We will band together and fix this. This lifts up Jane. Jane doesn't feel like she let anybody down. Jane recovers faster, right? Same if it's Jim or Bob or Larry or Brittany. We don't have this right now. What we have is somebody who waits until they crash and then everybody gets mad at them. And by everybody, I mean from team dynamics to public dynamics. Do you know how hard it is to heal when the whole world is calling you names?
Can't imagine, but I know the sports world is catching on to this, at least at the collegiate level, to offer support for athletes, and that's another improvement. So we've got some improvements. We're toward the end, Gabe. Is there something that we need to talk about we haven't touched on?
Jeff, there was some submitted questions and all very good. We've touched on some of them throughout, but one of the ones that we really didn't get to, and I know we only have a few minutes, but I really feel that it's worth bringing. And thank you for the submitted questions. We really appreciate it. Being involved in the email list is how you would have learned to submit those questions. So namitn.org. Whoops, I popped up the wrong one, and I apologize. There we go. Why do different doctors and therapists come up with different diagnoses? And I know we could talk about this for. You have no comment?
No, it's so common.
Oh, I thought you said no comment. I was like, no, Jeff, it's a great question.
Well,
Jeff, why?
Is we don't have a blood test or an X-ray, so we're looking at behaviors that are observed, and our diagnoses are classifications, and there's quite a bit of overlap between them. So I focus a lot more on symptoms and how they're impacting people than what is the name of the diagnosis. So other people don't agree. Having a diagnosis helped me understand what's going on. But I mean, you can have bipolar, unipolar, bipolar, whatever it's called, where you're just depressed and no mania. And it probably feels a lot like depression, I would think. So I am more focused on symptoms and managing them.
I want to say a couple of things. The first thing is, why do different doctors and therapists come up with different diagnoses? The question is a little bit it's sort of it's sort of blaming the doctor, right? The doctor and the therapist, like it's their fault, like they've done something wrong. And I want to dispel that myth right away. I live with bipolar disorder. So bipolar disorder presents as both mania and depression. Now, I knew nothing about mental health and mental illness before I was diagnosed. Now, this did not happen to me. This is just a made up story. But imagine if I would have landed in a psychiatrist's office when I was just experiencing depression. Now, I didn't understand mania or spectrum or anything like that. I'm sitting there depressed, possibly suicidal. That's what brought me maybe to the urgent care or the emergency room. And the doctor is asking me all these questions. Now, maybe when they get over to the mania side, like, have you ever experienced joy? No. Are you kidding? I've never experienced joy. I've never been happy. And mania just, No, I've never experienced that because, again, I'm not in my right mind. I'm sick. So all I talk about is depression, right? So it would not be uncommon for then a doctor to say, oh, well, you have major depressive disorder, or you have depression, or you're on the depression cycle. Now, then I don't go back to a doctor for 2 years. Now that's on me. That's not on the doctor. That's on me. And this happens a lot because I don't believe it. I don't want to be mentally ill. I'm going to pick myself up from my bootstraps. I'm going to rub mud on it, whatever. Now, 2 years later, I end up in the emergency room because of mania, right? I was dancing on the bar. I thought that I was a hero. I was getting ready to crowd surf at a preschool concert. It was a real mess. And they took me in, and now I'm manic. So I'm only describing manic symptoms. So a doctor looks at me and says, I think you might have bipolar disorder. And the first words that come out of my mouth is, you guys can't get your story straight. This is all BS. You don't know what you're doing. Listen, they can only diagnose what they see. As Jeff said, there's no blood test. And I have to give them a lot of information. And unfortunately, I'm not in a really good position to give them that information. This is messy. We all need to understand that it's messy. It's messy from the patient perspective. It's messy from the doctor perspective. It's messy from the therapist perspective. It's messy from society's perspective. But the one thing that I want everybody to keep in mind is when your diagnosis changes, this means something very powerful is going on. This means you're being listened to. This means that they are taking that new data and formulating new opinions to give you the best care possible. They're not just saying, well, hey, you saw a doctor 2 years ago and she said you had depression, so that's what you have. I refuse to listen to you. You know nothing. No, they're taking the old data and the new data, they're putting it together, and they're moving you forward. Listen, it took me 4 years to reach recovery because it took a long time. It's messy and it takes a long time. But I think that we need to control what we can control as a patient. That's our information. And I think that doctors need to do a better job of educating people that this is messy. They're not going to get it right. Like Jeff said, there's not a blood test, right? We're going to have to keep this open. We're going to have to be nimble. And maybe the diagnosis that you get on day 1 is not the one that you end up with on day 365. But that's okay because we're going to work together. And eventually, we're going to get you stable. We're going to get you to recovery. We're all going to get there. And then you're not going to care what they call it because you're going to be in Hawaii, like living your best life. Right, Jeff? Isn't that the goal for everybody? We're going to Hawaii. I've never been to Hawaii. I think maybe I need to go, though, because I use that example a lot. It's outside. Wouldn't that be? I know we only have like a minute left, but outside, Jeff, if I went to Hawaii, I would have to go outside. I know that would make you happy because you're always encouraging me to go outside more.
It's good for you.
It is. It is. Jeff, do you have any last words before we move on out of here?
Well, yeah, we have 2 exciting things coming up. We've got the NAMI Vision of Hope Gala, which is in person and virtual on May 10th. And we also have NAMI Walks 2022 in 3 locations, which will be in Knoxville, in Franklin, Tennessee, and in Jackson, Tennessee. That's very exciting. And then we also continue to be working with our CIT expansion to work with any community in Tennessee that does not have CIT yet or wants to build upon or expand their CIT. We've been very fortunate to put together a really experienced team. All this stuff is on our webpage, namitn.org. We still have classes and support groups online, but they're beginning to start in person as well. And check us out. And thank you, Gabe.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. And you know how you would have known about all of those things before Jeff just told you about them?
NAMI at Home.
Yeah, NAMI at Home and NAMI Tennessee's email list.
All right. Thank you.
I get very excited over the email list. Several people have asked me if I get like $1 for every person who signs up, and I always make the same joke. No, I get a toaster. For every 10 people who sign up, NAMI Tennessee sends me a toaster. That's a complete lie. Don't. That's untrue. But sincerely, sign up for NAMI Tennessee's email list. We really, really appreciate you. We appreciate everything you do, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.